Guys, we did it. We finally did it. We are caught up on the From Blood and Ash series. We did it. Hi, hello, how are you? My name is Celeste. If you are new here, welcome. If you are not new here, welcome back. And today we are going to be talking about the From Blood and Ash series. All 4 books that are out right now. In this, I'm not covering the prequel. I haven't read that yet. I need a break, okay? We are just gonna get into it. My plan for this video is to do short summaries of all 4 books and give my thoughts on each book and then do an overall kind of review. This will probably be a long video. We're covering 4 books in total and also in detail. So strap in, grab some food, some coffee, get a little blanket and snuggle up because we're going, okay? So we are starting with book number 1. Fuck, it's all the way at the bottom. Okay, we're starting with book number 1. Obviously. So a short summary, I'm just gonna say now, spoilers, obviously, if you haven't read this series, read it and come back to this video if you don't plan on reading this series and you don't care. What am I can't do anything. Welcome, have fun. So our story and the series as a whole is about our main character, Poppy, who is at the beginning of the series and at the beginning of this book, From Blood and Ash, is something that is called the Maiden. So it's what it sounds like. She's essentially a virgin who can't be looked at. She has like a veil that covers up so you can see her mouth, but she is supposed to live in solitude and isolation. She's not permitted to be spoken to, looked at with the veil. And she's like a holy figure, I guess, because she is supposed to bring in a new generation of something called the Ascended, or brings in this ascension, which in the first book, for a majority of the first book, if I'm remembering correctly, you don't really know what the Ascension is because Poppy doesn't know it. They haven't told her, and she really wouldn't know until she's at the Ascension. So she's essentially just this, like, I would put her as like a martyr character for this society. If I had to put it very short for what kind of religious figure she is, she's kind of like a sacrificial lamb of sorts. But Poppy, in classic main character fashion, she is a little rebellious and sneaks out all the time. So when we meet Poppy at the beginning of the book, she is at this like brothel where she's like in a mask. So she's still hidden, but she's wearing a mask and she's just kind of observing people, seeing what they do. When her main guard, his name is Victor, comes into the brothel and she's like, oh shit, fuck, like I gotta go, I gotta hide. So this woman directs her upstairs and she walks into a room with this like random dude. He's not very random. He is like a he's like a guard, like a very high ranking guard, and his name is Hawk. Hawk is like very well known in this story and in this like society as this very attractive, high-ranking single man, okay? And Poppy is like, oh my god, like, I'm in a room with him, he's gonna, like, what if he figures out it's me? I'm in so much trouble. But instead, a little bit of, like, spicy stuff ensues. They end up kissing, and Hawk is like, I need to go talk to someone really quick. Will you still be here when I'm gone? And she's like, yeah, totally. And then she leaves. So that is how our story starts, is that Poppy is kind of already breaking some of her maidenhood by doing whatever the fuck she wants, which it's like, you know, do you, girl, I don't care. So Poppy is like in this castle, I guess, whatever. And she and Victor are kind of like a father and daughter relationship. Victor teaches her how to fight because he wants her to be able to defend herself. Poppy wants to know how to fight because when she was a child, her parents, her mother and her father, were both killed by something called the Craven. They're kind of like bloodthirsty zombie-like things. They're people, and they just try to eat the shit out of you. That's all. And they ate the shit out of her parents in front of her. So she is like, I want to be able to defend myself unlike my mom could. So Victor helps her. She also has like her own guards and stuff who will take her on the grounds and stuff and walk with her. And one night she's walking around and this guard is not really paying too much attention. They're kind of just talking to each other. When this, like, I don't even know, like, basically an assassin or something comes and kills her guard, and then tries to abduct her for someone that they call the Dark One. The Dark One is an Atlantean who, in this side of the story, when she is with the place is called Solace. When she is on the Solace side, Atlanteans are like these bloodthirsty creatures, and you gotta stay away from them because they're gonna kill you, and you're a goner. Okay, so the Dark One is a very famous Atlantean who is trying to undermine Solace and the Queen. So Poppy's like, what the fuck? Why does the Dark One want me? Girl, you are a religious figure. Why wouldn't they want you? And her guard dies. Poppy is, terrified because a scary Atlantean who she knows nothing about is trying to kidnap her and probably kill her. So she is like looked after. When I say looked after, she's looked after. She's got guards everywhere. Even her friend Tawny isn't supposed to be able to see her face. And Tawny is like I think she's like a lady in wait. Like she's waiting to be married. She's waiting to be ascended. And Poppy for a long time is like, I think she's just my friend out of like necessity. I think she was like assigned to be my friend. But we later learn that Tawny is a true friend. And she also has Victor. So those are her two people in this crazy castle. She's looked after like she's a bomb, and she only has two people that she can really trust, which is kind of sad, but it gives her room to grow and develop. She's also very often abused, and I would say taken advantage of by I think it's the Duke, who like will ask her questions that he knows she doesn't know the answer to, or like just trap her in things and like beat her with a cane. So she has it rough, guys. And she has to watch like one of her guards, who I think she considered like kind of a friend or like a good acquaintance, die in front of her. So she's having a hard time. And then guess who replaces this guard? None other than Hawk, who was the guy that she kissed. And no one knows that she kissed him. Not even Tawny. She didn't even tell Tawny. And he doesn't even know that he kissed her. So Hawk is now her royal guard or whatever. And he's keeping a watchful eye. As, he has to be everywhere where she is. He's kind of really sticking up for her. Like, she has to do these schoolings or like lessons with the high priestess, who's like really fucking mean for no reason. And there was like one session where he just corrected her and was like, don't treat the maiden like that. And Poppy was like, oh my god, like someone's actually sticking up for me. So they start to get close, a little too close for like her maidenhood. And there's one night where obviously Poppy, who knows how to fight, there's like a craven attack. So they have something called the Rise, which I assume, if I'm thinking correctly, is like a wall that's supposed to protect the city. So they have a bunch of guards at the Rise, and there's like a shit ton of craven that were trying to get in, and so like all of their forces went to this for one night. And Poppy is like, I don't want to be a sitting duck, so I'm gonna go help. So she gets a bow and arrow and she starts like killing the shit out of Craven. Hawk catches her and he's like, what the fuck are you doing? So the Craven attack was assumed to be sent by the Atlanteans. So we already know that politically there are two kingdoms that are being set up against each other, Atlantia and Solace. But the fun like romance part is that Poppy and Hawk are in a different kind of battle, trying not to fuck each other. So Hawk catches Poppy. He's like, wow, you really know how to fight. And Poppy's like, wow, you really need to shut the fuck up and leave me alone. They're in this like kind of dance of Hawk is really trying to get to know her and Poppy is very standoffish. I think mostly because she has these like feelings and like an attraction towards him. So she knows that if she gets too close, she's not going to be able to stay a maiden. If you catch my drift, she's gonna fuck him. Okay, so there's more like bickering and bantering and like sexual tension, and Tawny's like taunting Poppy throughout all of it, and it's kind of funny and kind of cute up until there's like this celebration. Do I remember what it's called? No. It took me 2 months to read 4 of these books. I don't remember a lot. I'm sorry. My notes aren't that good. So there's like this celebration and Poppy is wearing a red dress and like a mask, and it's very much like, it's almost like a singles event. Like Tawny is there and she's really encouraged to go out and meet someone. Poppy obviously no, because she's supposed to be a virgin. She can't know love. Okay. And but Poppy is wearing this like beautiful red dress with her beautiful red hair, and obviously Hawk is like, well damn, like bitch is looking hot. And this is when, so Victor leaves. He's like, I gotta go do shit, you know, keep her safe, Hawk. And Hawk's like, aye aye, Captain. So they go to like this willow tree and they start making out. like they're on the ground making out, and it's like Hawk is very upfront about the fact that if they were not, you know, under a willow tree in public with like all of these like people around them celebrating being single and finding someone, that he would probably have taken her right there. And Poppy is also very upfront, and she's like, I probably would have let him, because at this point we as the reader know that Poppy really, really has a thing for Hawk, because he's very charming and attractive. I mean, look at this fan art. Like, look at this shit. They eventually stop themselves. Obviously they both look really disheveled and like, you know, they were just making out under a tree. And Victor finds them and he's like, what were you doing? And Poppy's like, I wasn't doing anything, we were just talking. He's like, you think, you know, I'm a fucking idiot? Like, you can tell when people have been kissing. You know, their lips get all cushiony and red, and, you know, their hair was probably all disheveled and their clothes were, you know, all fucked up because they were rolling around the grass. And Victor comes really close to Hawk and he's like, you need to back the fuck off. You know what she is, and I know what you are. Which, like, in, like, at that moment, the reader's like, okay, damn, like, I thought Victor was implying that he's like a womanizer, because that's kind of his thing. He's like a hot bachelor, I guess. Poppy's like, shut up, Victor, you're not my dad. I'm gonna kiss whoever I want. Leave me alone. And then they go inside, and then like a bunch of Craven and Atlanteans attack, okay? And Poppy starts defending everyone, but they walk in and they see the Duke one of the guys that like would beat the shit out of Poppy. He's like hanging Blood Eagle or whatever on like a chandelier or something. I don't know. I totally got that wrong. But he's like basically being sacrificed. He's been crucified. And Poppy's like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, I'm not sad, but damn, like, a little excessive. But they keep fighting. And Hawk is like, I have to go fight. Go be like, get yourself armed and defend yourself. Because he knows that she can fight. And Poppy's like, okay, cool. So she goes and fights. And she, like, kills Craven and the Lord, who was the other guy that would, like, abuse Poppy with the Duke. Starts taunting her. And, he's like, you're such a bad maiden, like, you shouldn't be able to fight. As she's, like, the only one killing, like, Craven and, like, people, like, defending her, the Duchess, and Tawny. And I'm just like, you fucking idiot. He's, like, not doing anything. So Victor comes to try and help, because they're kind of cornered. And Victor gets killed. He's gone. And Poppy's like, oh my god, like, I totally just did, like, the teenage girl thing where I was like, fuck you, Dad. I don't love you. And, like, something terrible happens to them. This was, like, one of my anxieties as a teenager. This is still one of my anxieties as, like, an adult. But as a child, going, like, up until now, I always have the, like, terrible fear that if I don't, like, say I love you to my mom when I, like, hang up, that she's gonna die in, like, a horrible accident. Or, like, if I fought with my mom before she left for work and I didn't, like, apologize, that she would die on her way to work. Or, like, her job would be bombed. What does that mean? That was a little bit of a trauma dump. Sorry. Anyways, so that happens to Poppy. My biggest fear. And so she's like sobbing, and the like Lord Mason is his name, is like, if you want to be fighting, then this won't happen, or blah, blah, blah. And he's like taunting her, so she kills him, which is amazing, like good. And then finally the Atlanteans and like the Craven are like kept away, and like the scene kind of starts to fizzle. Hawk finds her and he's trying to console her. But obviously she just lost her second father figure in her life, and one of the only people that were on her side. So for the next couple of days, Poppy goes into like a depression, obviously, until she gets news that she has to be transported to the Queen, to the kingdom. And this is because with the Craven attack and the presumed kidnapping attack, the Queen is like, you know, it sounds like the Atlanteans are really trying to get our maiden, so we need to up our forces and up our security. So Poppy's like, yeah, that makes sense. She's sad that she has to leave Tawny behind, but she's leaving with Hawk and a couple other guards. The other notable one is named Kieran, and she just notes that, like, she's never met him, but she knows that he's a higher up. And yeah, so they're going through on horseback, I guess, and they're going through like the blood forest, which is what it sounds like. It's a forest full of blood trees, and they camp for the night. And Hawk and Poppy sleep in the same tent, and things ensue in like the weirdest way possible. So, okay, spice alert, okay? If you don't want to hear about this, I don't fucking care. So they're like they're laying in their little sleeping bags, and Poppy's like, I'm cold and I'm like nervous about going to the kingdom. And Hawk is like, I can make you warm and forget about everything. So he like fingers her, and I was like, if I was Poppy, I'd be like, thanks, I guess. But obviously, like, she's never done anything before, and there's like a strong sexual attraction, so she's like 19, whatever. And so the next morning, Poppy is like, wow, that was amazing. Like, whatever. She, in her mind, she is choosing herself because she's always put the kingdom and her position as the maiden, which is something she never chose, obviously. She was deemed the maiden from a very young age. And she's like, I'm putting myself first, which I was like, yeah, you go, girl. Do whatever you want. Like, fuck being a maiden. Well, you know, do whatever. And she wakes up and overhears the guard Kieran, you know, basically scolding Hawk, and he's like, I know what you're doing, you need to fucking stop. And Hawk's like, it's fine, like, whatever. And that's the end of that. And then they keep moving, and then they get to this tiny little town where, like, all of these, like, they're humans, are just staring at Poppy, and they're like this, watching her go by. And Poppy's like, wow, like, they think I'm the maiden? I'm like, wow, that's so crazy. Like, they're so, like, they think I'm bringing change. That's so cool. It's not. They take shelter in, like, this inn. And Poppy and Hawk do the deed. Poppy is like, I'm choosing myself. And throughout the entire thing, Hawk is like, come tomorrow, I need you to remember this moment, where he's like showering her with compliments and telling her how wonderful she is. And she's like, yeah, sure. Like, I don't know, like, cool, weird request. Because we find out that, do you guys remember the Dark One? That one assassin that was like, I'm going to kidnap you and take you to the Dark One, dead or alive. Well, we find out that Mr. Hawk is the Dark One. And his name is Castile. Okay? A much better name. And we find out that Kieran is an Atlantean. Well, he's a wolf shifter. He's a good old Jacob. And Poppy is obviously very betrayed. She feels, you know, A, I'm being fucking kidnapped by someone I trusted. B, I just gave my virginity to someone who's been trying to kidnap me. Okay. What the hell? So she tries to fight her way out. She doesn't succeed. And the entire time, like, all of the Atlanteans are trying to kill her because they're like, you are the maiden, you are the Blood Queen's, like, pawn, and we want to hurt the Blood Queen. You know, we can't trust you because you are the maiden, essentially. They find her. She's been pretty beat up because this bunch of guards and Atlanteans tried to kill her. And this is where we see that Hawk does truly kind of care about her. He does care about her, not kind of. And he tries to assist her. He's, like, killing people that are hurting her. And this is where the end of the book is so crazy, okay? We find out Hawk, the dark one, the dark one, Hawk, Castiel, the dark one, is also the Prince of Atlantia. Yeah. And the whole reason that he has come all this way to kidnap Poppy, the maiden, is because he wants a leverage piece to get back his brother, Malik. I think that's how you say it. There's two similar names in this book, and I just want to ask Jennifer Armentrout, why the fuck did you do that? So Hawk tells Poppy what the Ascended are, because he's trying to convince her that, hey, I know I said that I was coming to kidnap you and use you as a leverage piece to get my brother back and probably kill you, but that was before I got to know you, girl. Before I took you to my bed and kissed you under a willow tree. I love you. I would never do that to you. So he is starting to grasp at straws, it kind of feels like, where he tells Poppy all of the things that we as the reader and Poppy have been in the dark about, aka the Ascension and the Ascended. So, the Ascended are actually bad. They are no good. I just hit myself in the face. They are no good. They are vampires. Vampires is what they call them. And they feed on humans, and they're like classic vampires where they can't go in the sun, they get bloodlust, and they're just terrible. And we learn that not the Atlanteans created the Craven, because that's what the vampires, the Ascended, told everyone, was that like the Atlanteans are bad, they created the Craven to take us out because they're so jealous of our kingdom. Duh. We find out that the Ascended created the Craven, and that they take children to eat. Because one of the big things is that like families will have multiple children, and I think like the first children are ascended, the second children are sent to the temples, and like the third children, I don't fucking remember. I might have gotten that all wrong. Essentially, if you're not a first child, you're getting fucking eaten. Like, you're done. So, yeah. I think I got that wrong, but I don't remember. And like he does say like, yeah, there are good Atlanteans, because Poppy has a brother who is ascended, and she's like, well, what about my brother? And he's like, I don't know about your brother, but maybe he's good, I don't know, but he's still ascended. We also find out from Hawk that he was held at a temple for like 50 years prior to his brother being kidnapped, and he was like assaulted and like driven to the point of almost bloodless, where he would like forget himself, and his blood was used to create new Ascended, because you need like Atlantean blood. So he was essentially tortured for 50 years, and then finally like his brother tried to save him, and then they did a switcheroo, and they were like, bye Castile, hi Malik, thanks for the new blood. Poppy during all this time is like, oh my god, I can't believe it, like he's, oh my god, like why would he do that? And his weirdly sharp teeth, because that's another thing throughout this entire fucking book. Every time they kissed, or every time she like looked at his smile, she was like, his oddly sharp teeth. Poppy, who the fuck did you say had like sharp teeth? Atlanteans, you dumb bitch. She plays stupid at the end of this book, and I was getting kind of annoyed, but I was like, whatever, like she's a heartbroken teenage girl, I'll give her some leeway. Yeah, she was just being like a dense bitch this entire time. Because even I was like, okay, he's definitely like not who he says he is, because we've got sharp teeth. So while Poppy didn't see this coming from a mile away, it was like back here. I already knew, bitch. Get with the program. So like Poppy is still obviously very standoffish, even though Hawk is like killing people for her and like chopping people's hands off because they touch her. She's still like, fuck you. Warranted. He did kidnap her. But to a certain extent, sometimes I'm like, come on, get over it. Why are you so hurt about this? Anyways, the ending of this book, we learn that the new plan is not for Poppy to be killed or to be like held prisoner or held hostage. She is going to marry Castile and become the princess of Atlantia, because surprise, she's not like other girls, and she has Atlantean blood in her. After they find this out after they have hate sex in the woods, in the snow, and I know she got a twig up her butthole because, damn, why are you doing that out in the wilderness? Yeah, that's how it ends. Is it says, we go home to marry, my princess. And you're like, what? What? Okay. We're gonna break this down. We have a couple categories for this to help this out. Overall, okay, so here's our categories. We have overall, characters, setting, the writing, the plot. That's it. Okay. So essentially, overall, I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. The characters, 4 out of 5 stars. Because, Poppy, you idiot. Setting, that was a good 5 out of 5. I liked the story and I liked the world building. Plot, 4 out of 5. The first 50 pages of the book were kind of boring. And, like, towards the middle, it kind of started to really, like, wane on me. Overall, if you want to read the first book, From Blood and Ash, read it. It's good. It's a good book. Just buckle in for the series. That's all I gotta say. It's definitely more romance than fantasy. The fantasy elements do, I think, come in more towards the later books, especially, like, I would say the 3rd and 4th book. But we'll get into how they're done. Okay? Okay. Next book, book number 2, Kingdom of Flesh and Fire. This one's a little thicker. I think the biggest one is the 4th book. But, okay, first of all, this is on correctly. This is how it came. You can see, like, you can see that this is where the crease is. Okay. Come on. Why is mine printed like that? Why is mine printed like that? You know how aggravating that is? I was so mad when I realized that. I try not to think about it, because you can also see it. Okay. So, a short summary of A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire. I'm going to keep this really short because the plot itself, there's really no plot, so it's kind of hard. Essentially, the plot is just going to Atlantia. The big thing is that Poppy is trying to forgive Castile for what he's done, for betraying her. It's also learning about the Atlanteans. It's learning about the Ascended. It's getting to know the other characters like Kieran and Delano, Emil. I'm just going to call him Niall. I don't know how you say it. You know, Jasper, Alistair, all these people who are very integral to the story. And yeah, so essentially the story, we start out in this, like, at the inn that we ended the first book in. And Poppy and Castile are still having, like, trouble with each other and trusting each other. And throughout the story, their relationship really develops in a very nice way. I will say that. Obviously, Poppy is not very trusting of Castile. I wouldn't be. And I think the author does a really good job of having those ebbs and flows when there is a distrust in the relationship. Obviously, like, he tried to kidnap her and, you know, put her up for ransom so that he could save his brother, which, yes, in his own right is a noble thing to do on his end. In total, is it free of faults? No, absolutely not. You shouldn't kidnap people. And I think, you know, throughout the story, like, it starts obviously where Poppy is very distrusting of Castile, but as we continue, there's a storyline of her and Castile pretending as Hawk and Poppy in order to continue fulfilling their desires for each other. Because even if they're upset with each other, specifically more Poppy to Castile than Castile to Poppy, there is still a strong bond and a strong relationship that they want to foster and to keep and to hold. And throughout the story, we see where Poppy starts to learn more about things like the joining, which is, it comes up later, so that's why I'm bringing it up. It's essentially something that would allow Poppy to live longer because she is human, she's mortal. And what it would be is, like, sharing blood with her, Castile, and Kieran, because he is bonded to Castile. And it usually turns into, like, a threesome. We learn about that. Castile obviously is, you know, trying to convince her to marry him and to stay with him so that they can, you know, get their plan all figured out. And eventually they come to the agreement that they will marry as kind of like a transactional thing. Poppy will help Castile find his brother. Castile will help Poppy find her brother. That's the whole thing for a lot of the book. And we have Alistair, who is Castile's uncle and also the advisor to the crown, essentially, constantly not believing the front that they're putting up, because they have to put up this front that they are marrying for love and not for gain for each other. Because everyone knew that Castile left to go kidnap Poppy so that he could get his brother back, not to go find a wife. We know for the entirety of the story that Castile loves Poppy. We know that it's very obvious that he has feelings for her, and we know that Poppy has feelings for him too, but we are also experiencing her trying to be in denial for them and to try and rationalize, you know, why she needs to let go of this. Eventually, Kieran relays to her that Poppy and he are heartmates. She's not very excited about this, and she actually gets really mad at him up until at this point, you know, I think about 3 or 2/3 of the way into the book, she does finally accept it, and her and Castile talk to each other about, you know, them pretending, you know, what is real, what isn't real, because Poppy tells everyone at a dinner that she forgives him for what he's done and that she understands what he's done and that she takes him for who he is. And she tells him, yes, that was real. I was telling you that. And that is when they finally decide, let's just get married now. So they get married, and the rest of the story is them being together. It's not pretending. It's not anything. And I think I really appreciated that that didn't happen until like 2/3 into the way of the book. It didn't happen halfway through. It didn't happen like 1/3. It happened as we were entering that last portion, which is good because it sets up the second book, and it sets up everything that's going to happen in our climax. Another big thing about this book is Poppy's powers. So I totally forgot to mention that Poppy has powers in the first book, where she can feel other people's emotions. She can change their emotions or like alleviate things. She takes it onto herself. It's kind of like bearing their burden, but it helps them. And her powers are changing because there's something, what's it called? Oh, so she's Atlantean, and every Atlantean goes through something called the culling. Put it up here. And it's presumed that she's going through that. We also learn that the reason why she might have these powers and feeling other people's emotions is that she might be from something called the empath bloodline, which died out long ago. And we later learn that it died out because people were afraid of what the empaths would do, because they would often turn into something called soul eaters, which essentially is like similar to like bloodlust, that the Atlanteans and the vampires will get, where they can't control themselves and they take all these emotions, or they use their emotions against other people in a really harmful and violent way. So instead of giving empathy, they're starting to become more apathetic, essentially. And Poppy, funny enough, is like, well, I want to be a changeling because then I can change and stuff. That's what the Wolven are, is they're like changelings, so they can shapeshift and stuff. But throughout the story, her powers really start to evolve. At one point, she heals one of these young Wolven's broken legs, you know, fully, no bruising, nothing. And she's like glowing. And at the end of the story, she like starts to do what the empaths were afraid of, where she used people's hatred of her and she turned it on them and killed people. And this is, you know, a huge part of this story is learning what Poppy's bloodline is, because she is never what she seems. She turns out to not only be part Atlantean, but a descendant of Niketos, who is, I think, the god of death, or he's like the primal of death. So he's like an original god. We also get a lot of hints to this because, you know, constantly throughout the story, we are giving hints that the gods are approving of Castile and Poppy's marriage, of their joining, of Poppy coming back to Atlantia. You know, when she comes back, her powers are, when she's like on home soil, her powers are so much more stronger. When they get married, the sky turns to night, and it's like seen as a great omen. And I really loved this book because it was so character development driven and not so much plot driven, which, yes, I would have liked a better plot. But we got to know so much about these other characters that are going to stay with us throughout the entirety of the series, especially Kieran and Poppy's relationship. Obviously, it starts really rocky because they're both very afraid of each other, I think. They're very distrusting, I think is the word. And throughout the story, it doesn't happen in this book, which I, again, appreciate because these things take time. And yes, as a reader, you're like, oh my gosh, I know you guys turn into like best friends later on. But we as the reader have to take time to let those relationships fester and bud, because then those relationships are much more rewarding in the end, similar to Poppy and Castile. And at the end, when it comes to these relationships and the character development and Poppy's powers, we find out that now that she is a descendant of the gods, she is the true heir to the Atlantean crown. She is now the new queen. And the Wolven are no longer bonded to the Atlanteans or the elemental bloodline, which is Castile's bloodline, but to her. So she really is coming into this power, and it is a huge theme in the next book. So I did really appreciate this book. I loved it. It's my favorite of the whole series. I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars overall. When it comes to the other little sub factors in my review, when we look at characters, I gave that a 5 out of 5. I think, you know, like I just said, the character development is beautiful in this book. I loved it. It sets up a great story to come. Does it stay to that? Not really. But in this book, I really loved it. Setting, I gave it like a 4.5. We're kind of constantly moving, which is kind of why there's not really a whole lot of plot. We're constantly going place to place to meet new people, learn more about Atlantia. There's a little bit of a major info dump in this book, a lot more than the other book. But it's never overwhelming, I don't think, which is good. And I do think the change in setting does assist us with learning all this new information, but still a 4 out of 5 because it kind of constantly changed, and there was never like really a fully stagnant place that we got to learn a lot of information at once, or feel overloaded, I guess. I don't know, whatever. Writing, I did give it a 4 out of 5 because, and this is an overall critique, I think, of the series, the dialogue and the story is very interesting. I oftentimes don't really know what time period this is supposed to be in because, like, you know, this comes in a later book, but like they use the term fuckboy. What time period are we in? And so it kind of takes you out of it. You know, I think Jennifer Armentrout's writing is very beautiful, and she can write these great action scenes and great love scenes and descriptions, but then she like writes some dialogue and it takes you right out of the story. Like, why am I reading about like this Atlantean and her powers and how she's like descendant of the god, and then she says something like fuckboy? Like, come on, like, what? Like, it's just so strange. So I did give that a 4 out of 5. Plot, I said a 4.5 out of 5. Again, it's not very plot driven, but I do think that this book is very integral to the series. Without this book in there and the way that it was written, I don't think this series would be nearly as strong in terms of its characters. So yeah, that is Kingdom of Flesh and Fire. Okay. Okay. I'm getting dinner tonight, so I'm probably gonna have to come back and do the other 2 books. So. Hi, I'm back. Dinner was great. It was free, so it tasted all the better. And I currently have a weird situation going on with my lighting. There's a big old window in front of my computer, and usually I've never had this problem where the sun is at like the worst point where it's directly into the window, and I looked like a washed out egg with eyes and a mouth. The camera is still like really picking up a lot of light. I put a bunch of like papers on the window because our curtain doesn't like fully cover, so there's always light coming in, especially from me because the window's like up high, so there's always light coming under. No one cares about that, but I just want to let you know that's why I look like this, and I will probably be sitting like this. So anyways, sorry for that long fucking no one cares. Today's drink is an iced matcha. Don't focus on me, focus on the drink. Or not. Okay, so it's an iced matcha with oat milk, lavender. If you've never had lavender in an iced tea or an iced latte, you're missing out. Iced lavender chai, iced lavender matcha, amazing. I mean, like, they're teas, so I always find that floral flavors work really good for them. So let's get into it. What do you say? So we have 2 more books to cover. We have The Crown of Gilded Bones, right there, The Crown of Gilded Bones, and all the way down here, The War of Two Queens. My favorite books in the entire series. That's a lie. Okay, well, let's get into it, okay? Shall we? The Crown of Gilded Bones. Look at that cover. Isn't it wonderful? It's definitely something. Let's do book number 3, shall we? Did you hear my voice? It rounds out to, I think, about 560 pages, and I think like 50 chapters. And you know what? It feels like a book that is almost 600 pages long. You never want a long book to feel like a long book. You want it to flow, and you want it to be like, oh my god, I totally just read 600 pages and I didn't even know it. This one, I felt like I was reading every time I picked it up, and I was reading it and I was like, oh my god, I've only read 20 pages. And I feel like I've been reading forever. And that's never something that I want in a book. So a short little summary of what this book is supposed to be about. We are picking up from Kingdom of Flesh and Fire, where we find out that Poppy is a descendant of Niketos, a primal god. So at the very most, we as the readers only know that she is a descendant of the god. We don't know yet that she is a god. And so this, as a result, makes her the true queen of Atlantia. The wolves now bow down to her, and in the first part of the book, she's like immediately captured by Alistair and has to be rescued by Castile and Kieran. So for like the entirety of the book, it's just mostly like the Atlantean people being wary of her, because she was the maiden of the Ascended. She is now a descendant of the gods, and she's now the queen of Atlantia. Her and Castile are still married, obviously, and they're still up each other's asses the entire time. Literally in the first half of this book, Poppy dies. She literally dies. And this prompts Castile to ascend her. He's kind of grasping at straws. And all I could imagine was the scene in Breaking Dawn Part 1 where Edward is trying to turn Bella because she's literally dead after giving birth to like Rice-A-Roni or whatever. And that's what I imagined. And so we learn that, like, I think that's where we kind of more so learn about Poppy's godhood, in that she is immortal but isn't immortal. She's ascended but not ascended. And essentially this is just like, this book and the following book is like, Poppy is not like other people, and her powers are just like crazy, and there's no limit to what she can do. Every other chapter she has a new thing. It's like, do we at one point ever just get a fucking break from the things that she can do? I understand that she is a descendant of a primal god, but damn, can she do a lot? Like, good for you, but I think it really sets up a troubling piece of our plot, in that for this book especially, I felt like the stakes were not very high, because Poppy just kept getting more and more powerful, to the point where it's like, I know that she's going to, like, you know, get the help of Nikitos's guards, the dragons. I know that she's randomly going to get this power that brings people back to fucking life, and she'll be fine. And it's like, we never have a moment where we're like, oh my god, like, her magic system is failing. You know, this villain, this antagonist is too powerful for our hero, Poppy, to defeat. I never felt like those stakes were high enough. So it just kind of felt like vibes. That's really all it felt like. That's what most of this series kind of feels like. So, war is looming over Solace and Atlantia, because obviously both want their land. They want their rightful land to be theirs. They want different things. War is coming. And Poppy, for a lot of this book, is coming to terms with the fact that she now has so many duties, which feels a lot for a 19-year-old girl. And sometimes I really just wish that she was a little bit older. Actually, most times I really wish that she was older, because Castile is, like, really old. And that's something that I always get in, like, fantasy series, is that, like, the protagonist, the person that we follow, the woman, is always young. She's barely out of her teens. She's barely into her 20s. And then the man is, like, some random creature and is, like, 100 some years old. Like, that's not weird to you guys? Not at all? Okay. It is to me. She's coming to terms with the fact that she has so many new responsibilities as queen, as a descendant of the gods, as now the person that all of the Wolven, you know, answer to. And I feel like Poppy has a lot of very valid points where she's like, I've never done this before. I have never led anything my entire life. I have been led. I've been the follower. I've done what people told me to do, and now I have to lead a nation supposedly into war. And I always felt like, yes, Castile is a very supportive husband. He gives her a lot of great praise and positive feedback. But I felt like there's so many times where she's like, I don't know if I'm doing this, like, super well. And it felt like he would be like, well, you're great and you're beautiful and we can do this together and let's have sex. And it's like, do y'all ever put your dick away, like, for a moment, for a day? Like, it just felt like every other, and that's something with this book, where it just felt like every other chapter, these people were fucking dicking down, like, doing the dirty no matter where the fuck they were. And I was like, put your dick away. Damn, after a while I was like, oh my god, I'm tired of this. Whatever. Overall thoughts of this book is that it's a decent book, okay? It's not the worst book ever. It's not the worst book that I've ever read. Is it as good as the first two books? No. By a landslide? No. I think the pacing and the plot really, really suffer in this book. It feels like there were some parts. This is what I noticed. So, especially in this book and the next book, War of Two Queens, is that the entire book feels like it goes on forever. And then the last like 10 chapters, the pacing picks up to like a normal pace to where it's like, oh, maybe we don't have to have 10 chapters covering them traveling on horseback. Maybe we could just skip ahead and, you know, get to the nitty gritty, the bones, the guts of it all. And I also really felt like, yes, this is a majority romance fantasy. I put romance before fantasy in this genre, or in what this book is in terms of genre. And yeah, I understand that. But like, if you're gonna have a high fantasy romance, I need there to be a little bit more action. I need there to be a little bit more fantasy aspects, and ones that we haven't seen before. I feel like we see a lot of the same things kind of repeat itself. Like, yes, it's kind of like a cycle. It's like Poppy and Castile do Poppy and Castile things where they can't keep their hands off of each other. Oh, and then something happens with the Wolven. The Wolven have to go check something out, and then that threat comes to them, and Poppy has to use her powers to kill them all with literally no threat to them. And that's how it is for the rest of the book, because it just recycles. And maybe that's just me. Maybe that's within myself and how I read it. But that's why this is my review. I think a lot of the times, another thing that really, really started to like suffer for me in this series is, oddly enough, and I don't want this to be like mean, okay? I'm sorry. I felt like the writing worsened. I feel like the writing of the first book was fine. It was doable for a romance fantasy. In this one, it felt like I really started to get that like that feeling where I'm like, I feel like I'm reading something on Wattpad, you know? Like, it just, it falls short in a lot of places that this series previously hasn't. And there are great aspects of this book. I think it really does well with expanding upon the world, what we know about the characters and the magic and the gods. It does set up a good conflict in the next book. How the next book handles it, that's not up to this part of the review. It's just the biggest flaw is the pacing, and it sucks because it continues into the next book, and I really hope it doesn't continue into the rest of the series, because when I read the first two books, I really liked them. I ate them up, but for where it's going right now, I don't know how much I can really handle anymore. It's just like, I always feel like there's just such trouble with like the middle part of the books, and I don't think that that's an uncommon thing when it comes to pacing and plot that authors sometimes have trouble with. There's been plenty of books that I've loved that had really, really great beginnings and really, really amazing endings, and the middle just is like, it's there. You know, we have a couple of highs and we have a couple of lows, but this one just felt like I was in like a desert for most of the middle, and I was just literally waiting for it to end. I think so. Before I get into the dialogue, which is one of my biggest gripes with this book and the following book, let's just highlight some good things really quick before I get too negative. I'm trying not to be negative. So I do think that Crown of Gilded Bones does a really good job of extending a lot of the character development that we had in Kingdom of Flesh and Fire, which I talked about, had great character development, especially for Poppy. And, you know, we got amazing banter between Poppy and Kieran. We really start to see their friendship develop. We really start to see Poppy become confident in herself in terms of her own character development. She, at the beginning, like if I were to read the first third of the book, I would see a character that I am not familiar with anymore. Someone who is very wary of her powers, someone who is not confident in who she is. Come to, you know, the last chapter of the fourth book, she has really grown into a force to be reckoned with, which I think is amazing, because I too often worry about these main characters and not really going all out when it comes to their powers. Like, I kind of side with Castile a little bit in that I love when Poppy is a little bit like violent. I want a character who craves that action and who isn't afraid to back down. And I do think Poppy does become a better version of that, where she's more confident, she's skilled in combat, and she knows it. She's never backing down from a fight, which leads to awesome action scenes, and that's not something that I will ever complain about when it comes to this book. I do think that in terms of the ending, like I said previous, it does lay down some really good groundwork for the following book. Again, how the following book handles it, I don't really know about that one. And I think on a last note for the good, this book does have a really good, like an amazing amount of plot twists. I mean, first from the Ascended to Poppy being a god to I think it's in this book that we learn that her father is not Malik, it's his twin. We learn that the Queen of Solace, Isbeth, is Poppy's mother. Like, there's a lot of things where, you know, I was not expecting, and I really appreciate being caught off guard by books, especially ones that I am worried will be predictable. And I thought a lot of that was not very predictable. The God thing, yeah, that was pretty predictable, because it felt like she's got too much power, guys. So, and it was very well alluded to. So, what I will end on when it comes to this book, before we get into like the number ratings, I tabbed this one, thankfully. And we're just gonna go through it, okay? When it comes to the writing, that was one of my biggest gripes, aside from the plot. I think it mostly comes from the author not quite divvying up what is taking up so much page space. I think we have a lot of instances where the pages are taken up by things that I don't feel are as necessary all the time. You know, like, I don't need 3 long pages of descriptions of where we are and what it looks like, because sometimes I'm like, you know what, just get me to the dialogue and get me through this book. Like, I think definitely towards the end I was starting to really skim, which not ideal. And the other big thing is the dialogue. So I found oftentimes, like, with fantasy, you want to be entrenched in that world, and, you know, when the time period of this book feels very, like, almost medieval-esque. Not quite, but I'm not a history major. I'm not a history teacher, so I don't know time periods. But, like, they just, you know, Atlantia only has running water. They use horses. They just aren't in the modern day. So why are these characters that are not in the modern day using modern day slang? And that's not to say that all of the dialogue was terrible. Like, there was definitely some really good quotes. One of my favorite quotes from the series was actually in this book, and it's from Castile, when Poppy is actively dying. And there was, like, some good humor, I think, in this book that I thought, you know, was really funny. So I guess I didn't actually tap any of the dialogue in this book. I did in the 4th book. But I distinctly remember the term fuckboy being used. Why? Just, like, it felt very out of place. And the worst part is that it only gets worse. So, overall rating, it's gonna be on this side. overall rating, 3 out of 5 stars. Characters, I did give a good 4 out of 5, just because I felt like even if sometimes they were annoying me, there was good character development overall that was very much needed to continue. I was really worried that it would kind of halt, that the second book would be like, oh, well, we did all of it, so we're just gonna not really do much more. Thankfully, that did not happen. Setting, I gave it a 3 out of 5. I think it really suffered with the plot, that we were in so many places, we were going to so many different things, and I don't know, it just felt disjointed. Plot, again, was a 3 out of 5. For reasons that I already said. So yeah, that is A Crown of Gilded Bones. Now we are gonna get into the War of Two Queens. Book number 4. The War of Two Queens. I really like the cover of this one. I think this one's pretty cool. Except, sorry to ever design this. Why did you not keep the same? Why is this not blue? Why? Why are they not all the same? Also, I am so sorry, but this is just something that I need to like rant about. Why does it look like this? Why? What is this? It was so distracting when I first started. I was like, what the fuck is this? I think the actual layout of the book stressed me out more than the book. The War of Two Queens is essentially what it sounds like. It sets up a war between Isbeth, the Queen of Solace, and Poppy, the now Queen of Atlantia. And at the end of the third book, Castile gives himself over to Isbeth, Poppy's mother / the Queen of Solace, in order to protect and save Poppy, because she was going batshit fucking crazy because she killed Ian, her brother. So I thought that was a great cliffhanger, and it sets up this book really well. Now, maybe I was just really fatigued from this series, which I don't know if I can really say that, though, because in the time between starting from Blood and Ash, you know, it's only 4 books, right? They are long, though, longish, longer than most books, I would say. In the time between reading From Blood and Ash to this book, I have also read like 8 other books. So I don't know if I can really say that I was fatigued by it, because I did take ample breaks in between them. But something about this book really, really gave me the fucking ick, okay? It really made me want to punch it through a wall and set it on fire, and I have no idea where all of this rage came from. Jennifer, if you are watching this video, I am so sorry, but click off, bestie. This is not to you. This is for my own personal being, okay? Since Castile has been captured, we are introduced to a dual POV. It's not as consistent per se. We don't get every other chapter is Poppy and every other chapter is Castile. But we do get them when they are needed, which is nice, because I always hated when books that were dual POV switched, because sometimes it's like, I don't need the other character's POV at this moment. I need to figure out what happens to this character, then let's get back to this person's POV. So I think the author did very, very well with blending the two of them together for the entirety of this book, because it continues. And I assume it'll probably continue into the following 2 books. However, now that we have 2 different POVs, both from the first person, who we've only ever had Poppy from, And Castile, who we've only viewed in Poppy's eyes before, we now have an issue when it comes to the foundation of Castile's character. Poppy is very well fleshed out. She is someone that we have been with for 3 books now and have really, really gotten down, her thoughts, her feelings, what aggravates her, her fears, literally everything. We know it for Poppy. But now that Castile is front and center, he's in the spotlight, we have him on this first person POV, he felt flat. And that's what I was worried about, because even though he is a very good husband, we get that from Poppy. I feel like for a long time, when it came to Castile's character, felt like, oh, well, yes, he comes across this one way because Poppy is our main narrator. She is the main person that's telling us about Castile. And of course, in her mind, he is this beautiful, wonderful man that, gives her everything she wants, essentially. And the hard part is, now that we are Castile, we are reading from his point of view, he still isn't really much more than a husband to Poppy. He's not really a much of a person. He's really there for her sexual gratification, to help her, motivate her, to be a motivation, I should say, and to give her affirmations, which great, but I would have really loved, and I think this would have helped so much more with Castile's POV, if, he's back in a spot that could be very triggering for him and very traumatic. He's back to where he was for 50 years, where he was literally tortured, and we still didn't really get a lot of backstory on it. I know we got some back in A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire from his perspective as told through Poppy, but I would have loved if we were in Castile's POV, and instead of just being a point of plot driving, in terms of he is the person that we can switch POVs to and hear about Isbeth's plan, we didn't get any backstory on a lot of the trauma that he faced. Yes, it's very much implied. Yes, we got some stories, but I would have really loved to see, how is this new situation and this new environment really affecting his own trauma? Because we know about Poppy's trauma. We know about everything she's been through with her parents, with the Dark One, with, Victor. We know all of that. But we don't really know a lot of Castile's from his perspective, which I think was a really, really huge missed opportunity when it came to this book. I also think that they were kept apart for way too fucking long. I thought it was going to be after the first third that they would finally get to him, but it literally took until I think more than halfway through the book, which sets up a lot of tension. But the only thing is that there wasn't a lot of tension because they were able to see each other in their dreams. And yeah, so it wasn't like, oh, we haven't seen each other, we haven't talked to each other, oh my god, for Poppy's end, I truly found you through my own power, and it wasn't through talking to Castile. And yes, I do think Poppy did do a lot of the work, but I wish that they had cut out that whole dream part, because I think it lost a lot of the tension. And so literally 20-30% of the way through, I was like, oh my fucking god, when do they reunite already? Brings in a huge point of this book, which kind of really sets up not even a love triangle, but almost like a polyamorous three-way, I guess, where Kieran and Poppy are together for a majority of this book without Castile. Over halfway through the book, we don't have Castile, Kieran, and Poppy. It's Kieran and Poppy. Castile's in a fucking dungeon. And there was so much tension between Poppy and Kieran, which I understand and I knew from the get-go was because the joining was going to happen in this book. And it did. But it was so strange because for so much of the second book and the third book, Poppy and Kieran are platonic. And I liked them being platonic. I I never saw Poppy and Kieran as having tension. And it felt like, and maybe this is just me and the way that I read it, knowing that the joining was coming. I had seen people talk about it before I even read the books, before I even knew what the joining was. And I understand that they were probably bringing it forth, like, this is why they would all three continue with the, like, sexual part of the joining. But now we are in a gray period where it's like, okay, is this going to become a throuple, or are we just going to fly past this like nothing happened? And the joining happened pretty late in the book, so we didn't really get an answer to that question, but I just never saw Kieran as like a potentially romantic partner for Poppy, so it was kind of weird that they had some tension. And I think the tension was really misplaced because I feel like the author could have just used the fact that, like, hey, maybe they just want to have some fun. They don't have to have like romantic tension. And it came out like Poppy feels more for Kieran than just, platonic love. And so it's I don't know. It feels very weird. And I don't think that completely diminishes the relationship between them. Obviously, there were a lot of strong moments, and Kieran and Poppy were really there for each other when Castiel was gone. And I did appreciate that Kieran made that promise to Poppy where if she gets too out of control, he will entomb her, which I know is probably a not great thing to promise. The only thing, though, is that tension, and it was so weird. Like, I think about I think it's when it's when he lets Poppy feed, and that's when we learn that you can show people different memories in order to elicit a response. So that kind of answers the question of, how Castiel could feed off of people and not feel a sexual desire, is because they just didn't feed it to them. And when Kieran allows Poppy to feed, he thinks of like good memories, he thinks of happy things, but then he shows the moment where, and I think it happened in the third book, where they are on the beach, and it's like a woven thing, and apparently the Wolven are very like touchy-feely. They love to show affection in public, including like sex, and Kieran and this person, I don't remember her name, were having intercourse on the beach, and Poppy and Castiel were watching, and then Poppy and Castiel do it, and we learn that Castiel was actively watching them, and he relays that memory of watching them to Poppy while she's feeding, which is kind of weird. Like, I don't know if anyone else was weirded out by that. Like, Poppy wasn't weirded out by it, but I was. And if I was Castiel, I'd be like, dude, what the fuck? Like, why did you do that? I think in terms of our main cast, a lot of the character growth kind of became stagnant, which was very disappointing for me, especially after the last 3 books. Especially after, the second book and even the third book, which I think really excelled in the character development. It felt like it felt like each character kind of fell into an archetype that I really was afraid that they would. Castiel fell into the archetype of the loving husband who never bats an eye at anything his wife does, or they never argue, and if they do argue, it never comes back up. Poppy is now just this all-powerful goddess who does whatever she wants. Kieran is just the best friend that is hot. And that's their archetypes. And that is not something that I was very happy to see. And I think it does a really big disservice to our characters that we spent so much time investing in and seeing their development. One of the big things when it comes to Kieran, Poppy, and Castiel's archetypes and the relationship, I feel like this series has really built up this idea of the joining. The joining essentially would allow Poppy, from what it was believed initially, would allow Poppy to have the lifespan that Kieran and Castile have by them sharing blood, and usually it turns into like a more intimate thing, a more sexual thing between all three. And it's seen by Atlanteans as like a sacred thing. You know, no one ever looks down on anyone for literally having a threesome. So cool, awesome, great. But now it's kind of been flipped on its head. Kieran has been poisoned, or he has a curse, which essentially I think will poison him. And Poppy wants to test out that if the joining could potentially heal the curse, break the curse, which kind of felt like the author's last-ditch effort to get the joining. It kind of felt like she introduced it, started to develop Poppy's character to the point where it's like, oh, she's ascended and she doesn't really need the joining anymore. I guess I kind of have to figure out a way to reinvigorate, like bring it back, but in a way that I guess kind of makes sense. Because it's kind of like, oh, you guys just had to share blood and have sex to break this like scary curse. Okay. And I will say, like, as the series went on, I really started to be over all this like spicy scenes, all the sex scenes, because they were just kind of the same. So the joining, like, I kind of skimmed over it, but I did notice that it was a lot shorter and it was a lot less in detail as I thought it would be. You know, I mean, threesomes are not very common in a lot of these very popular fantasy books, so I really thought that they were going to play it up and be like, hey, we are the book that has a fucking threesome that everyone wanted and stuff. And it really wasn't that spectacular, guys. It really wasn't that great. It just kind of felt like an obligation at this point, I think, and it felt like the author had an obligation to put it in. It just felt awkward to read, I think. So I wasn't really into it. Like, the ritual made sense. Okay, yeah, save Kieran's life. If that's gonna save him, cool, awesome. The sex was kind of weird because we've gotten this weird tension between Kieran and Poppy to the point where it's like, Kieran, do you like Poppy in that way? Poppy, do you like Kieran? What is going on? And I think it just made everything so much more crazy. And unless in future books this becomes like a weird love triangle like thing, I don't know why the fuck it happened. Because I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that's what's being set up. I think it was just like a grasping at straws, like, I need to add something fun. Something that I've promised. And it's just so out of place because Poppy and Castile have been set up to be these wondrous lovers. This is an epic romance. They're heartmates, which is like super rare, but now we have a third wheel. And what? Like, it has always been monogamous, and I don't have an issue with like polyamory, but you can't switch halfway through because that messes with a lot of the relationships and the characters that we have developed. And I don't, if it's just me, I'm sorry. If everyone else feels like this was not an issue, that's awesome. I'm really happy that you really liked it. Me, no, I did not. Yeah. I am glad to see that during the joining, Castile got really, really good with consent. I think another thing that when it comes to the development of the relationships and the characters, coming back to what I talked about with the archetypes of the characters, Poppy being this like powerful goddess that never has to practice. She's just naturally good at everything. God, there's nothing I hate more than a perfect protagonist, and Poppy is really turning into one. I want a bitch that doesn't know how to do shit and has to be taught and has to have her Mulan moment, okay? Make a man out of you. Come on. like, it's just not rewarding. And like I said, how many powers is this bitch gonna get? Do the gods even have this much power? We don't know what they can do. But for some fucking reason, Poppy can do fucking everything. And it's cool. Like, yeah, she has cool powers, but like, we need to put an end to the amount of powers that she has, because my biggest worry, and because I felt it in this book up until the very end, is that Poppy will get too powerful and she will no longer this series will no longer have a antagonist that feels powerful enough to take down the world, because that is what we're setting up. I don't ever want Poppy to be a character that we know will win. I want to be in constant threat of danger and to constantly be worried about her well-being, that she will die at the end of this. Because right now it doesn't. No matter what the dialogue says and no matter what the prophecy says, it does not sound like that. It definitely sounds like she will make this out scot-free and will be fine. I don't want that. I want to be worried that she's gonna fucking die in the end because her opponent is too powerful. Right now, like, yes, she is like getting a lot of power so that she does have a chance at the end when whatever happens. But I think the stakes would be so much higher if she did not know how to yield her powers. If she needed like assistance from someone. And I think it's a little too late to implement that now. So unfortunately, I don't think that's gonna happen. What we did get, I feel like, is a really good first villain of this series. Isbeth, awesome. Obviously she is not the villain of the series. She is just merely like a minor antagonist that leads to whatever final battle we are setting up in the 4th book or the 6th book. She is just like, obviously, like, she's an antagonist. We are not supposed to like her. But there's something about her that I just feel for. She has been through a lot, and that is what I like in an antagonist. I want someone that is bad. You know, they're an antagonist, they're a villain, but I want to see that complexity. I want to have an ebb and a flow between feeling bad for them, what led them to this point, to, oh my God, you are so fucking bad, I need you to fucking die. You know, like, I'll give an example. One of my favorite games of all time is The Last of Us Part 2, because it gives us a sympathetic, complex antagonist of Abby. And if you haven't played the games, if you haven't, I'm sorry, this is going to be a little bit of spoiler, so skip ahead. What I liked about Abby is that she has so much trauma that led her to the point that she is, and who she is, and what she has done to Joel and Ellie. And, you know, we, in her shoes, feel that empathy for her, despite the bad things she's done. And I think the author does a really good job of allowing the reader to feel empathy for Isbeth because of all the things that she's been through and has led her to this point. You know, losing her heartmate, losing her son, having to be someone that she's not. Like, that's a very good motivation, I feel like, for everything that she's been doing to try and get back to her heartmate. And it's so, like, she's so twisted up in that fantasy and this, you know, idea that she can get her heartmate back and fix what has been broken, that she would give up her own daughters for this man who's been entombed for God knows how fucking long. And it's so devastating and sad to see that, because that is such a human experience. Someone who is so blinded by love, they don't see what they have in front of them, and they end up creating so much more destruction that maybe, you know, at the beginning of this, they didn't think that they ever could do. Another character that I really liked was Reaver. I think he's pretty funny. I think it's pretty funny that he's always fucking naked, because I think that's they kind of went over that with the Wolven, I think in book 2, how like obviously when they shapeshift or they transform or whatever, their clothes are gone. So they're naked. But Reaver really just goes for it. He's just butt ass naked in the woods, and I thought that shit was so funny. So really all that I know about him is from this book, because I haven't read the prologue yet, and I don't know when I'll read that because I need a fucking break from this book. But yeah, we need to talk about some of the dialogue. I feel like this book is where the dialogue really got fucking weird and what the fuck, you know? So I definitely tabbed. I had a tab that was just called What the Fuck. And it's these dark blue ones, okay? You can't even see that. I want you to look in there. I didn't tab a lot, but what color is on there the most? Dark blue. This section will be both just my what the fuck tabs and dialogue, because this is a good point that I completely forgot. So my first tab is when all of the, like, nearly all of the dragons, whatever the fuck, are just killed on page 120. What was the point of that? What did that do for the story? Like, I know that it made it harder, but I felt like it never came back up. It never truly made it harder to defeat Isbeth. But it was just kind of like, why? I guess to show that, okay, I understand why a lot of the Draken were shown that they could be killed, and how, because it sets up a lot of that pressure, and, you know, oh, you thought you were safe because you got all of these dragons? No. And yeah, I think I just wish that it would have happened later on in the story, at the very least, 2/3 of the way through, if not at the final battle, because I think that would have been so much better. This was okay. This is my first dialogue tag. You can't even see it because it's so bright outside. So this is on page 276. They are talking about Lasagna, I believe, which is like an area that they're riding to, and Kieran kind of looks at them and they're like, lasagna? And Reaver's like, no, I didn't say lasagna, I said Lasagna, which is the area. And Kieran just says, sounds like lasagna to me. And all I had to say, I wrote a note that says, what time period is this in? Also, so canonically, Italians exist in this world. I don't know it just takes you out of it, because when you think fantasy, okay? When you think fantasy, you think we are in a completely different world. We are in a completely different map. America doesn't exist. Britain doesn't exist. China doesn't exist. Random countries. So why, of all the countries that have to exist, canonically, by logic, Italy exists? Because they know what lasagna is. Based on I don't know what time period this is. I figured it was like the Middle Ages. They have modern slang, okay? So in my head, I'm like, are we in the Middle Ages and somehow lasagna exists but no Italians? Or are we weirdly in like a country that doesn't have anything, just now got running water, but all across the lake, across the ocean, the Jersey Shore exists? You tell me. I don't know. Also on the next page, on page 277, Reaver just says, hold up. He's an old ass dragon. Why the fuck would he say, hold up? That took me out of it. There was like some parts where I was like, what the hell kind of dialogue is this? But it was kind of funny. I think my green tabs were like out of, like, I laughed. On 286, one of the things says, I think it was Poppy that said it. I don't know. She said, I think you just need to take your merry band of stinkers and get out of my way. What? Like, I laughed because, like, a merry band of stinkers, like, okay, pop off. But, what the fuck was that line? So intimidating, Poppy. Get your merry band of stinkers away from me. There's another part. Okay, I'm just going off of my tabs, and I'm getting a little distracted. Millicent, Poppy's sister, I fucking love her. I love her. I don't care. So this is like an unhinged part that I laughed at. So at this point, we don't know she's Millicent. She's the handmaiden. And it says, the Craven are so annoying. The handmaiden cocked her head. Streaks of black dye ran down her cheeks, cutting through the painted mask over her teeth. And she smiled broadly. I feel so pretty right now. What the fuck? Bitch is unhinged. Like, this is another funny one. I'm sorry. There is some good humor, okay? I'm lightening up this bad part of the review, okay? Castile says, so this is Reaver. So this is on page 446, first page of chapter 35. Reaver, so it says, a dull roar filled my ears. A hand fell down from Castile's arm, born of mortal flesh, a great primal power. At first I thought you knew this, Reaver continued, drawing me from my thoughts. You were able to summon us, you held the primer Nodum, and I realized that you only knew very little about, well, everything. I snapped my mouth shut. And you didn't think to tell her? Castile asked. Once you realized she didn't know? The dragon shrugged. She just goes. Here was one. You could tell I was fucking done with this book at the end. Page 437. My primal badassery wasn't exactly needed from there, and all I wrote was, girl, shut up. Like, shut up. No one cares. Some other quotes that I found that I didn't tab. I don't like to think of myself as a snack, more like the whole damn meal. He pieced out. That is a phrase in this book. He pieced out. Like, tell me that doesn't take you out of the book. Hearing or reading the words, I don't think of myself as a snack, more like the whole damn meal. Okay. We're gonna wrap this up a little bit. The ending, super interestingly weird ending. I do think it sets up the next book pretty well. I do think the author is very good at that, of setting up the next book. Because now we actually have a villain that could fuck everything up. Okay? We got some hard hitters coming, okay? We got a lot of work cut out for us, Poppy, and the rest of us. So, what do I want to see following this good setup, okay? I need to see Poppy learning how to use her powers, okay? Just a little bit. I need to see Poppy struggle to find the other gods. I don't need it to be like, oh, I know where that is, and then a 2-day trip, and then, oh no, the god's already awakened and can answer my questions. I need some struggle. I need some struggle bust up in here. I need some more action. Kill more people. More death. And don't bring them back, okay? I need some people to die, and I need them to die for real. Like, really die. Some of those main cast. Come on, kill someone. I need some more Millie and Malik. I think that's how you say it. It's not Malik, even though it's spelled like that. Malik. I need some more of them. I need to know more about, like, these Reavers. I need to know what the fuck is up with Callum, even though he's like really fucking annoying. I just need to know. I need to know more of this magic system because I feel like we've been focusing a little bit too much on the dick and not about on the shtick of this book, which is the magic, okay? So, okay, let's do my overall ratings. That went on for a really long time, so I'm really sorry. My overall rating, my overall rating of The War of Two Queens, a 2.5. And I gave it a 2.5 because I got really annoyed with the book. I started to really skim it. I was tired of these characters, which I never thought would happen. And I was really disappointed. And I don't know if I'm just really cynical, but like the dialogue took me out. The lack of character development was really weighing on me. I felt like there wasn't really a whole lot happening. So when we look at our next subsection, we have characters, which I gave a 3 out of 5. Our villain was great. I think we got a lot of good stuff out of her. I think we got a lot of good mystery around our other characters, like Millie, for example, and Callum. But our character development for our main cast kind of stagnated, and that really hurt my soul. Setting, I gave it like a 3 out of 5. I don't know if it just kind of was hard because I feel like in this book a lot of the times, I don't know, there was just so much, but so little. A lot of the time I didn't really even know where we were. And maybe that was because I was skimming a little bit, so I wasn't really doing a good job on my end as a reader. But overall, I give it a 3 out of 5. Writing, 2 out of 5. That dialogue, when it's good, it's good. When it's funny, it's funny. When it's not, it's fucking cringe, and I want to crawl in a hole and die. So it gives me big ick. Icky. Plot, 3 out of 5. I feel like it really suffered with the dual POV and how long it went on for. I think the pacing was really off, as it kind of always is, where like the middle of the book feels like I said earlier, a desert, and then the beginning and ends of the book feel like a fucking waterfall, and I feel like I don't know what's going on. So yeah, I was really disappointed to not dig this book because after reading, the first half of what's out for the series, I was really excited to catch up, and I unfortunately just did not vibe with it. And here's the thing, if you loved this book, if you loved The War of Two Queens, bitch, I am so happy for you. I am so delighted that you loved it. Like, truthfully, I'm so happy that you loved it. Unfortunately, I did not. So please do not kill me. Please. I just needed somewhere to air out my feelings because I am the only person that I know who has read this series, and I just needed to talk about it. I needed to get my thoughts out. So I know that there is a prologue series. I think about The Consort, if I had to guess. I have the first book. I keep hitting some. I have the first book. It's Shadow in the Ember. And I bought it by accident. I bought it thinking for some reason it was the 4th book. And I knew that the 4th book was called The War of Two Queens. But I got too excited and I picked up Shadow in the Ember and I was reading and I was like, wow, it's kind of weird that it's just talking about this random girl and not in a prologue. And then I was like, wait, what book is this? And then I looked up Shadow in the Ember and I was like, this isn't the book that I needed. And then I found out that it was a prequel. So I don't know when I'm going to read that. I've heard that it's good, but I just need a break. And who knows? Maybe I'll try and probably read it before the next book comes out. When's the next book come out? I think it comes out in June. 7. What do you mean book 7? Is there a 7th book? 7? Wait. So confused. Is there 7 books? Book 1, book 2, book 3, book 4, book 5, A Soul of Ash and Blood. Book 5 and half, Visions of Flesh and Blood. Book 6, The Primal of Blood and Bone. Book 7, Untitled. Hasn't been released. Obviously, the name hasn't been released. What do you mean? This is going to be a 7-book series. Oh. Okay. That is from Blood and Ash. I forgot what it was called. That is the From Blood and Ash books 1 through 4. That is books 1 through 4. Fuck. That is books 1 through 4 of the From Blood and Ash series. My review, my thoughts, my hopes, my prayers. Sorry, I know this video is long. I know this is a long ass fucking video, and I'm sorry. But I covered 4 books, okay? Get over it. If you like this video, like it. And if you like my videos, subscribe. I have no set upload date. I just upload when I feel like it, when the vibes are right. So thanks for watching. And if you've read From Blood and Ash, if you've read the series, let me know what you think. If you love this series, tell me why. If you hate this series, tell me why, but very nicely. Yeah. Follow me on all of my social medias where I post more frequently. Lately, I've been doing drinks for all of the books that I read. So go check out my TikTok or Instagram to go see what drink I made with this book series. Hint, it does have honeydew in it. Thanks for watching. Bye.